Hello and welcome to Expleo Explores. This series zooms in on the 9 success factors for mastering business transformation. These were identified through data gathered from over 1,000 senior decision makers in Expleo's annual Business Transformation Index report. Welcome to episode 1. Each episode we'll invite an esteemed guest on to talk about each success factor. Today's success factor is all about embracing a digital first mindset and what we want to get to the bottom of. Why is it important? What are the barriers to embracing this within a culture, and how can you master it as a success factor? We hope you enjoyed today's discussion. I'm joined today by Mary O'Connor. She is the Chief Information Officer at ESB. ESB has been Ireland's foremost energy company since it was established in 1927 and operates right across the electricity market. So that's from generation through transmission and distribution all the way to supply. And as CIO, Mary is responsible for driving digital transformation for the organisation, as well as overseeing cybersecurity and risk management, IT strategy and enterprise architecture. She's also a champion of driving business transformation through the application of data and technology and digital ways of working, which fits right into our topic today, all about embracing a digital first mindset. So Mary, you're very welcome to the podcast today. So we'll dive straight in because this is such an interesting topic and one that most organizations really struggle to master. So can you tell us, do you remember a time when you identified how important a digital first mindset was?
Yes, I'd say it was a couple of years ago when we were setting out on our digital transformation journey. And I suppose in looking back on it, we were quite focused on tech and data. But we soon realised that culture and ways of working were a massive part of this. And we weren't going to be successful without paying very significant attention to those aspects as well. And it was a realization that it was different to, let's say, the change management of a project. It was more about shifting to a completely different way of working and a different mindset. And I suppose you could look on it in some ways as modernizing our way of working and modernizing how teams work and develop stuff together.
Can you talk to us a little bit more about that change then in practice? Because you're saying it's not easy, and I think a lot of people listening would agree. You know, in practice, I suppose, how do you make that change a success?
Well, first and foremost, you have to put data very early in the whole thing and consider what data you have, what insights you can glean from that data, what you should prioritize based on those insights, what you need to focus on. And sometimes it can be a very simple story that tells it, but let's say a vendor colleague or a partner colleague told me a great story that I think shows it very well. And they were working with a client in the Far East, and they were designing solutions and apps and stuff for a shopping mall. And their whole focus was apps to find your shop or apps to find your merchandise or whatever. And there was a strong focus on rolling out apps to improve the shopper experience whilst in the shopping centre. But when they took a data-driven approach to it and really looked at the data that they had about customer satisfaction and customer pain points, what they realised was that the most difficult pain point and the greatest frustration for customers was not in the mall at all. It was when they were leaving the shopping centre. And it was the traffic flow out of the shopping centre that caused real frustration and actually caused customers not to return to that shopping centre. And they could have invested lots of money and time and resources into building fabulous apps when what they needed to do was change the traffic flow and maybe put a bit of digital and tech around the customer experience in the traffic flow space. And that's really, it resonated with me in terms of how data and insights can cause you to focus on something unexpected or different that can cause a significant improvement for the customer or the employee. So that was a lovely example and one that we would have used to explain why this focus on experience is very necessary. And
Brilliant.
that focus on data along with that.
Brilliant. Yeah, that's an excellent example. And it's great to be able to explain it tangibly, I think, for people as well, even within an organization, so that they can understand why the data is so central to the strategy. Because sometimes people can't make sense of that, I'd assume. So coming back to the idea of, a culture embracing a digital first mindset, it's a big and bold statement, I suppose, to imagine an organization where it's embraced kind of throughout the company. Why do you think that's important?
I think it's important because it's impossible to succeed in this without a huge part of, if not all, the organisation being part of it and working in a different way and collaborating in a different way, and having a very open mindset and not considering failure as a hugely negative thing, but to consider it as a learning experience. And that is it's a very big shift for large organisations like ESB and other like organisations. And I suppose it can only be okay if everybody's okay with it. So it's nearly a shift in mindset for everybody. And it's necessary, I think, to drive out the benefits and the business outcomes from the investments. At the end of the day, value has to be returned and, costs controlled and, as I say, business outcomes delivered. So it requires everybody nearly thinking and acting in a different way.
So I'm going to move on to the famous barriers to this success factor. So if we look at the Business Transformation Index, so 79% of respondents conceded that without digital transformation, their organisations just won't exist in 5 years' time. It's just not going to happen. However, 1/3 of them did admit to struggling with the culture and change management that's required to nurture a culture of with the digital first mindset. So I suppose, can you talk us through the types of challenges that a company would have? And I know your experience is from quite a large company in this instance, but the types of challenges that companies would have when it comes to creating that culture that's digital first.
Well, for organisations like ours, work in the utility sector, but I'm sure this is true of other sectors as well. We've been traditionally expected to have a very asset-focused mindset, all about reliability, availability, operational risk, and a really rock-solid engineering focus. So it is a significant change to expect people to move to a very different way of working, putting a strong focus on data and agile ways of working and iterative as opposed to big projects and all of that. So there are significant change management expectations, I suppose, and supporting your people in moving through that is important. I think one of the biggest, let's say, things to get over is to move from a project mindset to a product mindset. And again, in large organizations, we've become very accustomed to having large projects, large IT projects, and that go through a design and a build and a test, which in some cases are more or less handed over to IT to deliver and then handed back to the business. And moving from that to a product mindset where it's a business person that is the product owner, a business person deciding on which features will give us value here, which features will give us good business outcomes, where the team that are working on it are a hybrid team of business people and digital people. It is again a different way of working, and making that shift from project to product is a big thing here. Also working in an iterative way and not expecting perfection, getting more comfortable with minimal viable products and then iterating and adding to that and making it better and better as you go on. So not expecting absolute perfection from the get-go, instead delivering something that will give the minimal value to the business and then building on that. So all those things are part of this, and do involve change for people. They also involve significant capability shifts, and brand new skills and even brand new roles. Like the role of product owner is a very key role in all of this. And that's a new role for lots of businesses. Yeah. Also skills like UX and CX and EX and PX and all these experience focused skills. Those are all new. And then, of course, data and various roles involved in data, be it engineering or data science or AI or whatever, all new capabilities and skills to be built up. And that whole space, again, a huge challenge and a huge barrier for organisations at the moment, because it's just so difficult to get talent and attract and retain talent.
It really is. And actually, one of our success factors, not to give it away down the line, is around that sharp focus on digital skills and training to fill the kind of gaps like that you were just describing. I'm really interested in the point that you said about moving from project to product, because a lot of our traditional ways of rewarding and commending staff evolves around these aspects of, timelines. So, completion dates and go lives and releases and that sort of a thing. How do you sell the idea of moving from a project to product strategy to the business?
Yes, I suppose there's a few things there. I think back to the point you made about how we reward people first, and I think it's very different to keep a team motivated and invigorated and energized around products and constant and keeping at it, as opposed to a project with a fixed timeline and there's a big go live and everybody celebrates. So I think organizations really have to think about how they celebrate wins here. And we're not good at this, we're only beginning to realise the criticality and importance of celebrating the small wins as you go along the journey. And we've had a number of external awards recently, which is a neat way of, getting external acknowledgement and celebrating those. But you need to recognise and identify. You actually need to plan and identify what you can celebrate, if only to keep people motivated and energized. So that's one thing. In terms of the business, what we're seeing more and more recently is that the business are delighted when we develop or deliver something that's small but gives value and results in a business outcome, no matter how small, and then we build on it and iterate and add more to it.
I want to pick up on something you mentioned about the energised employees, I suppose. So these are the people who are moving from the traditional ways of working into the new ways of working, where we need to look at new ways to celebrate them. From the research that we did, what we saw emerge was clear signs of what they termed the disengaged middle management. Now, most of our respondents were above middle management, so we couldn't actually pull any pure results that we could report on in the report, like, kind of with confidence. But there was definitely something there around this idea of the disengaged middle. Do you think that that's something that exists, or something that could perhaps hamper the movement towards a digital first mindset?
Well, I wouldn't necessarily describe it as disengaged, but I think something has struck me recently about, let's say, people who are very good at what they do and they're on top of their game, and now we're asking them to shift a completely different way of working, but they've built up an expertise, they're very good at it, and sometimes they can maybe unconsciously maybe not engage fully with these new ways of working, or the people who are maybe showing the new ways of working. So I think there's something there in getting people, helping them, supporting them through that shift. It might be from project management to product management, and helping them get really, really good at product management, and then, for their career to take off in that sense. So there may be a feeling that maybe some of the skills that they have built up and that they've become expert at are maybe no longer required. Now, we'll always need projects, and there'll always be underlying enablers that will need to be implemented using a more traditional and tested and tried project management methodology. But yes, I think supporting established people in shifting to new ways of working are part of this as well, and giving them the skills and the confidence to do it, and not thinking that their skills are no longer required or aren't as relevant. I think they are very relevant. I think it's strong, let's say, core IT skills, I feel, can be built upon and expanded and developed into more digital skills. and that it's a very strong foundation on which to build newer digital skills. And it also means that you're taking your internal expert people and you're giving them more options and more possibilities in terms of career and skills and so on, as well as relying on partners to bring in new skills, but really growing your own and developing your own is an important thing here too.
Yeah, absolutely. And I suppose it's a sense that they feel like they're being invested in as well, isn't it? And not kind of left behind. And that's exactly what that would instill in someone. Mm-hmm. So if we bring it to ESB then, how would you describe ESB on, the journey to having a culture that is digital first?
Look, it's a journey, I suppose our organisation is like founded in 1927. Our methods and mindsets are definitely what has been expected of us since our foundation is very strong asset focus, all that reliability, availability, operational risk management. And we're now trying to shift to agility, innovation, agile ways of doing things, data focus, experience focus, and all of this. So look, we're on that journey. Some things going very well, probably things not going as quickly as I would like overall. But how do you create that wave across the organisation? And something that's kind of, let's say, resonated with me recently was you nearly need to change from a communications for awareness and training perspective to communications from a marketing perspective. And like, how do you market the benefits of this for people internally and employees as well as customers and whatever else? So the whole communications side of it is very important here and another critical success factor.
That absolutely resonates. And it actually, I think we'll touch on that as well in one of the later success factors, because I think that's a huge part of why, sometimes underutilization is a problem or a lack of buy-in just internally as well. And it's quite simple, but it's often left out of those strategies from what we can see in the data as well.
I think the question that I've been asked most often in this space is what is digital? And people craving a very clear and concrete definition of digital. And that can kind of put a stop to your gallop in that you can be, positioned to give a very positive update about loads of progress. And then somebody says, but what is digital? And it can bring you right back to, base zero again. And I see the same thing with ESG at the moment, whereby people are saying we need a clear definition of ESG. It's like you can't pass go until you have a clear definition of something. When I think as leaders, maybe it would be helpful to embrace that adaptive leadership approach of saying, we don't really know what this entails. We don't really know what we have to do here yet. We know we have to work differently. We know we have to put the customer at the center of everything. We have to put the employee at the center of everything. We have to get insights from data and prioritize based on that and make our decisions based on that, etc. But after that, we really don't know the detail of how we'll achieve all this. And then embrace it wholeheartedly and go for it, Whereas waiting for an absolute, very clear definition of everything can, I think, cause it can hamper pace.
And do you struggle with that, with management kind of change into that adaptive leadership style? Do you think that that's going to be a struggle for businesses?
I think so, but I think it's all part of it. And I think it's the difference of having a constrained way of thinking and an unconstrained way of thinking. And I think people are under great demands, and those demands are growing the whole time. There's just so much now in terms of workload and hybrid working, recovering from COVID, getting everybody into established in hybrid working and all that. There's lots of things coming at people, and they naturally think in a constrained way that we can't do that because we can't do that because we'll never get it approved, or we can't do that. It might cause an IR issue. We can't do that because the shareholder won't agree, or we can't do that because whatever. Whereas trying to encourage people to think of a future in an unconstrained way what would that future look like? How could you really knock it out of the park in terms of customer experience and so on? Or how can we really drive decarbonisation and our net zero agenda? What does that look like? How do we get there? And then work back from that. Whereas I think because of the pressures that people are under, they're inclined to think, oh, I can't get that far because that might happen, or there is that risk, or there is that issue. Whereas if you can picture that future in an unconstrained way and then work back from that in terms of how you're going to get there, and then deal with your implementation challenges along the way. So supporting our managers in thinking that way is something here as well.
And have you seen success in that in your role in ESB, even on a small scale, say if you're not there on the large scale yet? Have you seen just how successful that can be?
Yes, we have some lovely examples, and I suppose that's something else here as well, is those little examples. And I say little in that, again, in terms of mindsets, we're all used to a small number of big things and, a small number of big projects, and get those big, hairy projects over the line and we'll be okay. Whereas now, really, it's more like a huge number of small things. And, all those small things making people's lives easier and more straightforward and propelling us towards a net zero. But having those lovely examples of those small things to show, be it a lovely analytics dashboard, or a really cool data visualization tool, or a lovely piece of AI. We had a lovely example in ESB networks and smart metering. So clocking up your examples to show people and encourage people is good.
And I suppose making it easier for them as well, to showcase their own achievements. That always helps for them as well.
And the art of the possible, I suppose. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I think you're in a really interesting sector to be talking about the embracing a digital first mindset, because in the energy and utility sector, we're seeing innovation and agile transformation at a pace that I think it was unforeseen. We can see big oil companies, on huge transformations to renewable energies, and like yourselves at ESB, I know you have a commitment to net zero by 2040. Do you think that having that type of ambition drives a digital first mindset within your culture? Having that joined up vision?
Yeah. It's absolutely necessary to have that, that clear purpose, and to have everyone bought into that clear purpose. And ours is to create a brighter future for our customers and the communities we serve. And we have our strategy to get there. That's our strategy to be net zero by 2040. And it's based on scientific targets. So having everybody lined up behind that and bought into it is definitely necessary. And for everyone to be able to see their role in that context, and agreeing OKRs or goals with people that are absolutely and clearly linked to that purpose and that strategy, that's imperative. And the beauty of it from a tech and data perspective is that none of it will be possible without data and tech being right at the center of it. Like never before, I think data and technology and, careers and roles in that space are pivotal to net zero and pivotal to decarbonisation. It's a really exciting time to be working in data and tech, and also to be in the utility sector.
It is a really exciting time, and we're at Expleo, we're very proud to play a part in it as well in any small way. I think this topic is an interesting one because it's the one success factor that everyone seems to agree with, but everyone seems to see as the biggest challenge for a business, to have a whole culture that embraces a digital first mindset. Is that the reality, or is it actually quite simple to do? What type of investment, I suppose the question is, from the business point of view, does it take to actually garner that culture?
And I don't know if the investment is any greater or different than, let's say, traditional investments. And I think the reason I say that is if you consider the change management effort that would be in a big IT project from 10 years ago, be significant change management effort and resources and impact assessments and all of that business, and then communications around those impact assessments. Whereas now everything is designed around experience, or as much as possible, you're designing everything around experience. So your change management should actually become more straightforward, because you're giving people solutions that remove the pain points and make their experience better. Whereas before, and this is only a short time ago, I feel solutions were mainly designed around internal processes and internal ways of doing things and pushing paper around the place. Whereas now what we're trying to do is we're trying to design all these solutions mainly around the experience and what the data is telling us about those experiences. So when the person goes to use that solution, be it an employee or a customer, it should be far more intuitive. It should be far easier. It should be far nicer. It should make their lives easier and better, and allow them manage their electricity in a better way, and so on, you know. So, strangely enough, maybe I'm naive in this, but if done right, the change management should be more straightforward and easier, and you should get bigger bang for your buck in terms of your investment, because the whole thing is designed around experience. The other side of experience, and there's loads of facets in this here now, is if you're delivering in an iterative way, and if you go with a minimal viable product, and you have to be ready to call it and not invest and not go further if you're not going to get the value or the business outcome. But if you develop and invest further on an iterative basis, you actually have more control over what you're investing. And it's not like you're investing millions in a huge big project that you're going to see light of day in 2 years' time, by which time requirements have changed anyway. Instead, you're going to constantly iterate and get features, and so you can see your return on your investment in a more gradual way as you go. Now, another facet there is the whole financial processes and funding around this is very different. Again, we're all used to going for big business cases and writing your business case and getting it approved, and then you have your funding. Whereas now we're talking about funding a hybrid team that will make the decisions about what features and what's next. So you're probably funding a team for a period to deliver value, more so than delivering or funding a particular project with a fixed scope and timeline. So the whole financial processes are something that's important here, and bringing finance with you, and the finance culture is very another critical success factor. And then because of the move to cloud, and this also means a shift from CapEx to OpEx. So you're going to have more of your investment is going to be OpEx than before. Again, that can be difficult, particularly for regulated entities and so on. So managing that in the best possible way is a factor too.
Okay. And how would you manage that? Would that be like kind of dealt with differently, I suppose, from company to company?
I think yes, and having finance part of it from the get-go is important. Something I probably wouldn't have seen early enough, but we're very much in cahoots with our finance partners now in trying to define the best way possible in terms of funding these investments and getting the value and the return. I suppose a TOTEX approach is a way to go, and I know that lots of organisations and regulatory authorities in the UK have moved to a TOTEX approach, so that's a possibility in the future.
I'm really interested in this idea you keep coming back to around centering, you know, everything you do around experience and the customer. And because my background is in marketing, I'm very familiar with this because, you know, we're completely customer oriented, or at least we strive to be, you know, in everything that we do. And there's an idea that Jeff Bezos, head of Amazon, he took that marketing mindset and applied it to the business. You know, this idea that everyone centers what they do around the customer. And I don't know if you've ever heard of his empty chair, but this was when whenever he had a meeting, he'd bring in an empty chair, and that would be the customer. And the whole idea was the whole business was shaped around the customer, and they contacted the customer all the time. Even for an organisation, say, like yours in the energy and utility sector, quite old in terms of how long it's around, is that the kind of shift that you see helping to transform your business?
Yes, a customer customer focus is definitely one of the principles as such as of our digital program, and absolutely designing things around the customer, involving the customer, as in the customer out in the street at as early a point as possible, getting their feedback, getting insights into their pain points, and so on. That's a very huge part of it. Not only the customer, because it's also the employee. If you consider the number of employees we have out in the field and their experience in doing their jobs in the best possible way to deliver for the customer, and enabling them to do that, enabling them to perform as effectively as possible. So designing solutions around their working day and what would enable them, knock it out of the park on behalf of the customer is important. So it's employee experience and customer experience.
Yeah. There's a really common theme, I think, coming from our discussion today, and that's around the idea of purpose and linking a sense of purpose to people's jobs. I mean, you've the wider purpose of working towards a net zero, but even in those small iterative programs or iterations within a program, that idea of linking a purpose, whether it's for an employee or whether it's for a customer, seems to be a real key from your experience in kind of unlocking this digital first culture. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, no, I don't think for a minute that we're already there, that we've reached our destination. It's hard yards. But yes, linking purpose, be it our net zero and our brighter future purpose and net zero strategy, or the customer experience and making the customer experience better, is very clear purpose. And having principles, having a small set of principles to guide all that is very important. And having those principles agreed at a senior level, and then saying to teams, just go and you decide, and empowering those teams to just deliver based on those principles.
Great. Well, before we let you go, Mary, we like to finish off every episode of the podcast with a top tips section. So just a brief pulling together of a lot of the information and nuggets of wisdom that you've imparted for us today. So in relation to this success factor, embracing a digital first mindset, what would be your top tips for somebody listening to this podcast that they could take and embed into their way of working, say, from tomorrow onwards?
I'd say collaboration, to have a highly collaborative way of working. Ignore silos, work with your colleagues, work across team boundaries or functional and all of that. So a highly collaborative way of working. Put the customer at the center of everything, or the employee, depending on what you're working on. For example, internal enterprise services functions, it will be the employee that you'd put at the center of everything, but with the customer, being the primary objective at the end of the day. And then data. Use data. Try to base your decisions and your prioritizations on data rather than on opinion or seniority. Just be open to always learning. Don't assume you have the answer. And I suppose that's about it. If you could get all those, that's the magic.
So Mary, that brings our podcast episode to an end. A big thank you for your time today. I've thoroughly enjoyed our discussion. I think there's so much in there that people can benefit from. And like we say, start using from now onwards. So thank you again for your time.
Thank you, Siobhán. I really enjoyed it too. Loved chatting with you.
So that's it for episode 1. We hope that you enjoyed the conversation with Mary and found it rich and full of insight. Thank you for tuning in to Expleo Explores. You'll find the Business Transformation Index report on our website, along with the other podcasts as they're released, and that's at expleo.com/podcasts. We'd love to hear from you. Please do join in the conversation on social media. Just use the hashtag Expleo Explores. Next up, we have Finn Goulding, who's a CXO advisor, and he's here to talk about success factor number 2, which is all about garnering support at board level for your ambitious IT strategies. So that's going to be a really good conversation you don't want to miss. Thanks once again for tuning in, and have a great day.